It's a short-term versus long-term. If you're in it for the money, you're going to make short-term financial decisions that will ultimately cause the business to suffer in the longer term.
That's Roland Frasier, serial entrepreneur, renowned business strategist, and marketing expert.
I don't generally go into an acquisition unless I see that there are multiple exits and multiple acquisitions and a long-term thing that's going to come from it, because it's so much easier to get that momentum going on multiple deals than it is to not.
I'm Michael Mogul, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. Today, we're revisiting one of our most popular episodes from the podcast, where I sat down with Roland Frasier to discuss what the most successful businesses have in common, why once-in-a-lifetime opportunities come along more often than we think, and how to scale your business through acquisition.
I don't think there's anything that you're looking for in terms of growth and scale that you can't get through acquisition. I think that's the fastest way to do it. You literally double your business overnight.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. Roland Frasier is an accomplished investor who has bought or sold over 100 public and private companies, ranging from $3 million to $4 billion in adjusted sales over the past 30 years. He specializes in marketing strategy, business negotiations, and structuring mergers and acquisitions across a variety of industries. I began our conversation by asking Roland about his early days as an entrepreneur.
I did everything from magic shows to lemonade stands to anything I could think of to make money. I always liked business. I think it's probably because my dad, he's a tax attorney, so I saw lots of business people in our lives and thought it was cool. So yeah, it's been there for a long time.
I've gotten different answers to this, but when you talk about entrepreneurship, because you're around entrepreneurs all the time, how much of this do you think is nature versus nurture?
My research into psychology says it's pretty much all nurture. If you look at everything from the Skinner studies on, what he did with his kid and kind of, the child found in the wild theory and all of those kinds of things, I think that the more opportunities that somebody gets to be exposed to something, the more likely they are to understand it and go in that direction. So I think, when you think about, there's a lot of talk about privilege and white privilege and things like that. And I think that for us not to fully acknowledge that whether we realize it or not, just everything that you get exposed to takes you in a direction that gives you more opportunity to be an entrepreneur and think like an entrepreneur. And that's something that if more people could get exposed to, I think we'd have a lot more interesting things out there.
I agree. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you're technically a recovering attorney. I guess if you could speak to that path and your experience there, because I believe originally you'd never intended to practice law.
I didn't. So when I was growing up, my father was, it still is to this day, interestingly enough, a tax attorney. And so he just told me, I said, I don't know what I want to do. And he said, well, I tell you 2 things. And I was, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He said, 2 things I can tell you. One is if you understand accounting, you'll be able to do anything you want in the business world, because it's important to understand finance and accounting. And also nobody will ever be able to pull the wool over your eyes about numbers and things like that. And if you know law, then you'll be able to understand that. And that'll be a huge advantage as well, particularly if it's tax law. Of course, he was biased in that direction. And I got to say, I used my accounting and law background pretty much every day in business. And it's a tremendous advantage, even just understanding how financial statements work and where on a financial statement something shows up. And hey, we should probably check into this when we're buying this business. Do these people really own the business, and all the due diligence things that come up? So it's a very, very helpful background to have.
From what I've read, even early on, you were kind of ahead of the game in regards to like flat fee, like billing models, because there's many attorneys that are obviously they're very transactional that have hourly billing. What are your thoughts on that?
So I read an article in the National Law Journal when I was in law school. It was actually a client writing an article about the challenge with attorney's fees. And they said, I can get the Taj Mahal built for a quoted fee, but I can't get a will done for a quoted fee. And I'm not comfortable with that. And it doesn't make sense to me why attorneys can't tell me how much something should cost. And I was like, that makes a heck of a lot of sense to me. And so that was back in the days when Yellow Pages was the primary source of advertising for attorneys, and advertising was still kind of like, can we do that? And so I just had I bought display ads in every category in the attorney section of the Yellow Pages that said flat fees, and nobody else had it. And so it was a tremendous competitive advantage because of course I'm attracting that kind of client at that point, but they come and they're like, I've never had an attorney that offers that. So that's amazing. Now, what's funny about it is because we standardized the services that we were doing, we were making 5, 7, 9 times the hourly rate that we would have got otherwise, because we charge $1,500 or so, or $2,500 for a trust or to form a corporation or something that a paralegal would do, or we would take literally 10 minutes of our time to do, and we're getting paid that fee. And I couldn't have honestly billed that much time for it, but the value to the client was there. And so our leverage on what our effective hourly rate was multiples above what most people were charging at the time.
And last question I want to ask you, obviously there's a lot of lawyers and law firms that listen to this podcast, but I want to get your thoughts looking ahead to the future, because if you've kind of read what's happening in Arizona and Utah with like non-lawyer firm ownership, and you've seen this in other industries, so it's happening now in the legal industry of outside money and outside capital coming in. What changes do you think will result as, with outside money coming into the legal industry?
I think it's always a mixed bag. I think that the good old boy network gets blown away, which I think is a good thing. And I grew up in Virginia, which was a very good old boy, and moved to California, which was much, much less so. That to me is a positive. I think there are negatives in that at the lower levels, it's likely to HMOify things. And when I was first practicing, like when I first got out of law school and I opened up a practice right out of law school and had no clients and was like, where can I get these? And I signed up for prepaid legal to be a representative for them and others. And like, they pay nothing, nothing. So I think you'll get attorneys at the lower level providing lower level services for corporate owned groups of those kinds of things. Whether that will mean that legal services will be more available to people that couldn't otherwise afford them or not, I'm not sure. I doubt that they will be very quality legal services, but I do think there's a lot of things that attorneys do that paralegals and other people can do just as well that don't need to be done by attorneys. So I think what is likely to happen is that the lower end of the spectrum will become very competitive, and wages will go down and fees will go down and legal services will be more affordable. And the higher end probably will be completely unaffected, because high quality anything, the people who can afford to pay that are willing to pay it. And the best attorneys are going to command the best fees and the best clients. What do you think? I'm kind of curious as to your opinion on that one.
My thoughts on it is that the business of law becomes more important. So when you say more competitive, my thought immediately is that like what more competitive oftentimes means is not just more competition and more saturation, but also in the sense that things like automation to various levels of efficiencies, customer service and client experience, those types of things start to become more prioritized than just the service that's being provided.
Absolutely, 100%.
Which is interesting, because I think if you're a solo small firm, if you're a law firm owner now, and I want to be able to kind of, this is probably a perfect segue into talking about how you value businesses, because I know you do a lot in terms of just everything from, I think you've bought and sold over 100 public and private companies at this point. When you're looking at a business, whether it's a law firm or otherwise, what are the key aspects of that business that you're looking at to be able to properly value that business?
You have the baseline valuation first of, is it an owner-operated business or is it a professionally managed business is kind of the threshold. And then we use a valuation. Basically, the most common ways then is going to be a multiple of profits. And profits in an owner-operated business are generally going to be SDE, or seller discretionary earnings, which is accounting profit, adding back the owner benefits that maybe the owner, a lot of owners will, for tax reasons, put a lot of things through the business that maybe aren't absolutely essential to the operations of the business. I know none of your listeners or viewers would do that, but some people do that. If it's owner operated, it's SDE multiple, and if it's not, it's an EBITDA multiple, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And so I think that's the very first thing is can your law firm operate without you? If you are critical to the law firm, then it's going to be a different valuation level than if you are not, because it's also really hard to scale if you're the owner operator. And if you are exiting and you have a personal brand of any type, including one in which you're providing primarily the services or wearing lots of the hats, or your personal brand, which is the case with a lot of law firms, is critical to the business, it's hard to transfer the goodwill from that human to somebody else. And so if I was thinking about, honestly, I wouldn't do a law firm now, because to me, it's just too hard. Although I know they do sell, and we acquired and sold when we were practicing bits and pieces of the practice. And then I ultimately sold when I left. But I would go out to anything that I could do to not be the owner operator. And I would do anything I could to brand differently than my individual name if I was thinking about selling. The XYZ legal clinic and those kinds of things where they're talking about specific services that are benefit oriented or channel or line oriented are going to do better in a sale than an individual practice that's, Roland Frasier's law practice or Michael's practice. That's going to be harder to sell. So I'd be thinking about that if I was thinking about selling. And then think about who my buyers are. Are my buyers a law firm? Or maybe as things change in terms of who can own law firms, maybe we'll see a lot of M&A activity. But the M&A activity is going to be most beneficial to the people who have the ability to not be tied to the business. So I'd be thinking about, how do I depersonalityify my business? Those would be some of the things I would be thinking about.
And I imagine also just having a business with some degree of predictability, making sure that you can do proper cash flow forecasts. So, with anything, whether it's a law firm or otherwise, having enough of, like, say, systems in place and metrics in place to be able to just at least forecast properly. So I think oftentimes when you're looking at selling a business, I've long since heard that if you can build the type of business that could be sold, it's chances are the things you're doing are really good for the business. So like processes and systems and having just layers and depth and so on make for just a good business, period.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have 31 points we go through when we're looking at making a business what we call exit ready. And absolutely, that the more of those things that you can do, the better. And there's none of them that will actually hurt your business. And I can't think of any of them that wouldn't help.
It's interesting, like in the legal space, there's, obviously there's the selling of a law firm, but we've seen a lot of law firms grow through the acquiring another firm, whether they're acquiring their case inventory, whether they're acquiring just, let's say, their website, other intellectual property, things like that, as a faster way to scale. And I know you've talked about this in the sense of like the different levers that you can pull to scale a business.
To me, it's you just say, what is it that I need? And I don't think there's anything that you're looking for in terms of growth and scale that you can't get through acquisition. I think that's the fastest way to do it. You literally double your business overnight. So if you want to get more market share, then you can buy your competitors. That's the easiest, kind of most obvious thing. But then a lot of law firms are looking for, and businesses in general are looking for more leads. And so more leads come from more media, finding people that have aggregated the eyeballs and attention of your ideal customer profile. So that's like, there are people who've already done that, and those assets and companies are available. And it could be as simple as a Facebook group. It could be a podcast like this one, or an event like you just finished, or any of those things. And so I think if I'm looking to grow my business, I can acquire my competitors. I can acquire media so that I get more leads. I can acqui-hire by acquiring other assets or firms that have the people, the resources, the SOPs that I want. If I want to develop software, I just acquire a company that's got a dev team already put in place, because I don't know how to build one, but I know how to buy one. If I need more average order value, hire lifetime customer value, then I can acquire other products and services that will complement the ones that my customers are already buying. If I need to be innovative, I don't have to do it myself. I can acquire IP. If I want higher margin, I can vertically or horizontally integrate so that I acquire my margin from my suppliers, which might be a staffing company that I'm using right now for my law firm, or a litigation support company or somebody like that, or down to distributors if I'm getting referrals or paying any kinds of fees or have people that are helping me sell my services or products. So yeah, I think that's just a fantastic way to get where you want to go about 1,000 times faster than doing it organically.
Now, there's going to be people listening to the podcast. They're saying, Roland, that sounds amazing, but I don't have the money to acquire another business. Like that sounds expensive. And what say you to this?
One of my big things is acquiring with no money out of pocket. So which a lot of people confuse. So I think it's really difficult to acquire a quality business for no money down, meaning that there's no money that changes hands. But there are lots of opportunities, and you really heard about them back in the 80s with leverage buyouts, where companies were being acquired using the assets of the company to pay for it. And so I'm at 219 ways to do it without having to come out of pocket, not meaning that at closing that the seller won't receive a lot of cash, because there's a lot of places that you can get that cash from. Everything from simple things like seller financing and earnouts to supplier loans and accounts receivable factoring and all kinds of things like that, and asset-based lending, ABL. There's so many places that money exists in the business that's a good, profitable business that can be used to pull out and pay to the seller, that you really don't need a lot of money to acquire businesses.
I guess this is this concept of like leverage, because I want to be able to touch on this, where this might be, unfamiliar to a lot of people in the sense that they're thinking they've got to have X amount of dollars to be able to acquire another business. But, part of the reason for them acquiring another business is either acquiring leads or case inventory or whatever it might be to scale. What are some of the best ways to use leverage to do that?
So to me, it's like just some of the things I was saying. So seller financing, I go with the law of price and terms. The law of price and terms says if I'm giving you your price, then it's my terms. So when I talk to somebody and I say, I'm not going to haggle with you, I'm going to give you your price, it's going to be my terms. If I'm going to give you your price, I'm not going to beat you down on that. Here's what I'd like to do. And then I generally start with 80% seller financing, 20% earnout. That's kind of my initial offer. And a lot of times they've never thought about seller financing. If they're not willing to do any seller financing, it actually gives me a great deal of concern, because I feel like they don't have faith in the ability of their business to operate with someone other than them in a way that's going to be profitable long enough for them to get the financing that they're going to provide. And so that's a tell, and that's going to be a big deal to me if they're not willing to do that. Earnout is a great way to say, look, we can't agree on the price today, or I agree on the price today, but there may be things that happen, particularly in a law firm, that maybe several of the clients leave because you're not there anymore, or maybe these cases don't pan out the way we thought, or maybe there's a supplier that's providing us with all of their workers' comp cases or something like that, like a key client that then goes away. Well, then an earnout allows you to adjust for that and say, if things stay the way that they are for the next 1 to 4 years, then I'll pay you this full price, but we're going to defer 10 to 40% of it based on whether these things happen or not. And that could be that revenue stays at the same level, profits stay at the same level, the number of clients stay, a particular group of key clients stay, any of those kinds of things, or employees for that matter. And then you get into other kinds of financing that are different. So, and I don't know because I haven't practiced in a while, but let's say somebody's taking credit cards, then there's typically reserves that exist. There's cash flow based loans, which particularly for contingency practices could be really helpful, that maybe there is the opportunity to finance the business acquisition based on the cash flow that it's anticipated to receive in the future. And that's not typically done through a bank. They're cash flow lenders, or maybe the seller does a cash flow based financing like that. Maybe there are key employees that don't have equity, that have never thought about having the possibility of it, and you acquire the business, and those two partners or those two senior associates that weren't partners that won't participate in the buyout now have the chance, because you give them a chance to buy in, to tap their home equity loans or their 401ks or their retirement plans or their family and friends or savings or stocks or whatever to buy into the business for an amount equal to the down payment that you have to come up with. So like, I love to have people who are working in the business own part of the business and pay for the down payment with their investment buy-in. I think that's a really cool strategy. Sponsors too. If there's someone who has a desire to have access to your clientele to provide them a non-competing service, and that could be another law firm that provides a service that you don't provide, or it could be the financial planner that would like to have access to all the people that are getting the billions of dollars that you're earning for the clients or whatever. Those people might pay a sponsorship to be able to access your clients and customers. And what's cool about that is sponsors pay every year, not one time. Investors pay one time and get to be in forever and also have some say. Sponsors, not so much. So I love sponsorships as a way to fund as well. So I'm always thinking about what is the amount that I'm going to have cash to come out of pocket based on whatever the seller wants to do, which is always smart to ask. So what are you going to do when you sell this? Oh, always wanted to go to Antarctica. Great. You're going to do that right after? Yeah, I am. It's going to take a year off and go to Antarctica. How much is all that going to cost? That's going to cost about $300,000. Fantastic. And so the business is being sold for $3 million. They only need $300,000 today. So that's kind of where I start. So then I'm looking for seller financing for everything they don't need. And I'm thinking about how can I come up with the $300K without having to go to a bank to get it because I don't like banks, right? So that's to me the approach that I think you take. And then, like I said, there's literally hundreds of ways to find funding that does not come from a bank loan.
It seems like creativity often plays a fairly significant role in the structure of any of these deals. So then on the other side of this, I'm curious, when you're going in and you're evaluating a deal, you're considering either an acquisition, what are some of the red flags that spook you or give you pause?
So the seller won't do financing is a big deal to me. That's a really good litmus test of how much do they believe in the company. And then the other would be bad NPS. If they haven't been measuring customer satisfaction, I think that's surprising now because it's such an important metric. And I would want to know, like, if there was no customer satisfaction, no NPS, Net Promoter Score information, then I would definitely be wanting to do an every nth client direct outreach to find out how happy are the clients and how likely are they to recommend. That's a big deal. Financial things like all the normal FDD stuff, the financial due diligence, you would take a look at. We do a lot of cash. So I have a lot of customers that pay in cash and, I don't report all of that. Oh, great. Well, we're going to have deferred tax liabilities and all kinds of potential challenges there. Payroll taxes with 100% penalty coming in and having potential liability for that. That's something that would make me nervous. The big things are the customers happy? Is there one client or one referral source that is critical to the business that if that went away, that represents more than 10 or 20% of the business, that would be a big issue for me. Are they litigious in their own lives? Even if they're a litigation firm, if they find that, I've never been able to work with any of my partners and I've always ended up sued because nobody's good. It's like, okay, well, we're going to be suing each other too. So a life's too short for that. I would run, not walk from that. Those would be some of the ones. Also employee NPS, like what are they doing to measure the happiness and satisfaction level of their employees, and is there high turnover and bad Glassdoor reviews and things like that? That would be important as well.
And looking back just over your history of deals, is there one or a couple that stick out that you regret and that just you look back on and there was just a huge learning lesson from?
I only have one deal that I would say I regret, and it taught me a very good lesson, and that was my law partner at the time. His stepfather, who had raised him from being, his father had died when he was really young, basically was a fiduciary manager of investment funds. And he ended up stealing $1,200,000 in cash from me and $400,000 from his son. And I went through all of the due diligence that I normally go through, but definitely trusted the relationship. And I won't make that mistake again because that was pretty painful, especially at the time. And so I regret that it happened because it's also the only person I ever sued. And I sued him because I couldn't let him do it to somebody else. I felt like he basically took the money and spent it on personal stuff. And that might rise to the level of a crime, but it certainly isn't something. As a fiduciary, I just felt like I wanted him to have a fraud judgment because it was devastating to his kid and it was devastating to me. And other than that, to me, it's always, I'd rather go make more than sue somebody, but that's the only time I ever did that. And I regret doing the deal because I didn't look at it in the same way I might have looked at other deals. Interestingly, it put no stress on, I wouldn't have sued him if his kid hadn't have been like, yeah, I don't care. It didn't put any stress on that relationship, and we're still friends. But I also learned something from it. So to me, every bad experience, and I've had some pretty bad ones, leads to learning and evolution and more good stuff. So I'm pretty low on the regret stage.
And what about on the other side of this? Have there been a few deals that you look back on, you're either like, man, I made out like a bandit, or I'm really glad that I got involved with either this business or these people because that's led to a lot of upside for you?
Truly, it's almost every deal, because I have a philosophy where I say that I think the once-in-a-lifetime deal comes along 3 or 4 times a year. And so the deals that you don't do are much more important than the deals you do, because if you get bogged down with the so-so deals, then the once-in-a-lifetime ones might pass you by, or you might not have the resources to be able to do them at the time that they show themselves. So I'm really particular about the deals that I do. And because in my experience, the once-in-a-lifetime deal comes along 3 or 4 times a year, those are the ones I do. And they've generally all been pretty fantastic. Like, there are deals that elevate you. I think you have in your life a continuing series of breakthroughs if you're a lifelong learner, and each one of those, you're like, how the heck did I not know this before? And I'm pissed about that, because that happens to me all the time. And I think I'm doing okay. And then I'm like, how did I miss out on knowing this about this thing all these years? How, right? It's so simple now that I see that. And so each of those deals to me brings me farther along in that. I do deals based on people more than anything else. And so the people that I've been able to connect with, my business network is my friend network, is my social network. It's all been pretty great. I mean, I've had a couple that just like didn't pan out, but in those cases, that's never litigation or anything to me. It's just like, hey, okay, what is my part in it? What is the other person's part in it? What can I take from it? And I don't ever care, because I cultivate a healthy disrespect for money. I just don't care. So like, if I get into a deal and I've invested something in it, the other person's invested something and the money goes away, I don't care. I'll make more. If I get in a deal and it's not working out and they're unhappy for some reason, I'll just give it back to them and say, give me my money back. I don't care. I don't want to be in a deal that you're not happy with. So all of them have been just pretty great experience. It sounds awful to say that, but they're pretty, if you have that way of going about things, there aren't any bad deals unless somebody just lies, cheats, and steals, which I've only had happen one time. Then they're all pretty great.
It seems like these deals have spanned multiple different industries just across the board. I mean, everything from, software companies to real estate to e-commerce. When you're going into something like that, did you have like prior experience in a lot of these industries, or did you have to get yourself up to speed on that?
Yeah. So one of the things that to me is important is I like to stay off the org chart. So the set of skills that I have transfers across any business, because I'm not an operator. I am a strategist. And so I'm a strategist and a connector. And so what's interesting is, like, if I look back over all the deals I've done, I'm still in business with pretty much all of them, unless they've just like retired. So my relationships are, 10, 20, 30 years. And the new ones I have, we all aspire to have them become that as well. And so then we end up doing multiple deals together. And I don't generally go into an acquisition unless I see that there are multiple exits and multiple acquisitions and a long-term thing that's going to come from it, because it's so much easier to get that momentum going and work with a group of people on multiple deals than it is to not. So being industry agnostic, saying I can take what I know about business strategy and apply it in the legal field or the CPG field or the SaaS field or the e-com field or whatever, is really, really helpful. And so I would encourage people that don't have just an absolute passionate obsession with a particular industry, to cultivate the skills that allow them to be industry agnostic so that they don't have to get up to speed. And then as an investor, I want to stay off the org chart. So I don't want to imprison myself in the bars and concrete of the little boxes that have job titles and job descriptions, because then I'm stuck in that company being an operator and I won't be able to think about the business as the product or service that I'm selling. Because that's how I think as an investor. My widget that I sell is companies. And so if I'm working in the company, then my widget that I sell is whatever the company sells. I don't care about that so much as I care about the higher level things, which to me, it's you can work in the business as an employee, on the business as a CEO type operator person, or above the business as an investor. I like the above.
And in some of the most successful businesses you've been a part of, what have been some of the commonalities of them? Like whether it's the people, the teams, the type of work they did?
Yeah, it's always great people, obsession with customer experience, and then really critical too is that you're on an industry that is on the rise. Rising tide raises all boats. That's a big deal. And I know McKinsey did a study, and that was the number one thing that helped businesses that grew the most. Is like, it's not their strategy, and they're smart. It's not our strategy, but it's, if you're in an industry that's going up, you got a pretty good chance of going up anyway. And then if you've got good people and customer experience and hopefully a good product and offer, that's kind of a hard combination to beat.
And what about on the other side of that? What about some of like the least successful businesses? Is just the opposite of all that? Or have you seen certain behaviors, certain leaders that just tank businesses?
It's the counterpart to those things, if not the opposite. If you're in it for the money, then it doesn't go well because you're thinking about the wrong things, and those things might be short-term. It's a short-term versus long-term, right? If you're in it for the money, you're going to make short-term financial decisions that will ultimately generally cause the business to suffer in the longer term. So that's a big deal. And you see it in businesses all the time. And you watch a business that starts out and it's super successful, and then they start cutting corners, and then the people aren't as good as the people that were there before. And it's a shame when that happens, because that's always going to ultimately have a negative impact on the value of the company and the customer experience. So yeah, I really do believe it is exactly not paying attention to those things that causes you the challenge. The only thing I would say is I have seen people ignore significant risks that then they don't think it's going to happen to them. Like, let's say that you're selling exclusively through one channel like Amazon. And I've watched Amazon just say, yeah, we sell that now through Amazon Basics. So now you're competing with Amazon, and they have all your data, which I think they say they don't look at, but I don't believe it. That can kill you. That can totally kill your business. You can be the most customer obsessed, best people. We do good in the world. We've got a great offer. The industry's taking off, but other people are watching. And so if you put yourself in harm's way because you're not thinking about very basic, important business concepts, then you can be taken out by that kind of surprise, or a regulatory surprise, or an innovation surprise. I don't like heavily cutting edge tech businesses because there's a very good chance you'll be obsolesced out, and you've got to invest so much to stay up. And then all that investment can go away in a minute because a competitor comes out with something that just completely eats your lunch. So those things to me would be three things to be very, very aware of as you're dealing with it. And I think there is some threat in the legal world with AI and with blockchain, which I think can eliminate a lot of due diligence and things like that. And that evolution we talked about with respect to ownership that are definitely things that I would have my eye over my shoulder on if I was practicing right now.
And it's fascinating. So when you say threat, which I agree with, it's almost interesting. On the other side of that coin, with dangers and threats come opportunities. Okay? So if you're strategic and you're creative, this presents a lot of like market opportunities where you start to see a lot of players shift in the marketplace.
Yeah. The only thing to be careful about with the opportunity is being too soon to move on it, right? Because everybody is jumping at that opportunity. So you want to be careful to not be one of the ones that fall out, because there's usually only 3 to 5 that kind of get through that. Not that there's not a lot to be made in the short term there. But if you're a long-term player, it's like you want to be cautiously tiptoeing into that opportunity when it's the opposite side of the threat.
So Roland, I'm curious, when you're deciding whether to jump into something, whether it's some industry, some business, what type of, I guess, due diligence or research are you doing? Is it actually researching the industry? Is it talking to various business owners within that industry? Like, what's your process?
Yeah, I subscribe to pretty much every trend organization there is. So I'm in Trend Hunter and Trend Watching, and there are trend reports that come out every year from Andreessen and some of those guys. I want to know, what is the market doing in terms of what's it moving towards and away from, so that I can steer the investments that I've got in the direction of the positive long-term market movements, not the fads, not the short-term obsessions, but the longer term where things are going. So I think that's really, really important. And I spend a lot of my time digesting that kind of information. I think that's really important, because there's not a lot of change in business strategy after a period of time. There's not a lot of new personal development things that are going to come out that are going to be this revelatory breakthrough that you never thought of once you've gone through a few hundred personal development books and courses and things like that. So I think you look at where is the greatest marginal incremental improvement opportunities for you and what you do. And that's where I like to focus my attention, where I believe those opportunities exist.
And I want to talk about the intangibles briefly, just on the marketing side. So one of the things that I don't know if a lot of people who are listening to this know this, but that Rolls-Royce Ghost that we gave away at the Game Changers Summit, Roland was actually the inspiration for it. You were the one who told me to do it. And I remember you picked me up in a Rolls-Royce Dawn. And when I saw this thing, I was like, okay, we got to give away a Rolls-Royce Ghost. And it's interesting because people ask me, when we were doing this whole challenge over the span of a year, they're like, well, why'd you pick a Rolls Royce? You could have picked some other car or whatever it is. And you're not necessarily doing like this cost benefit analysis, right? It's not like I'm checking the ROI of a Mercedes versus a BMW versus a Rolls Royce. But I find that a lot of people try to like quantify decisions like that. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a branding thing. Like, you are the Rolls Royce of the service that you provide to your customers. You are, right? I mean, that's what your company is. And so I think that if you align yourselves with those brands, then it's going to have a subconscious, if not conscious, impact on people to associate you with them and say, that's the best car there is. It's like when you go into the dealership and they sell 3 or 4 kinds of cars that are all super nice. And I was in with a buddy of mine. I think we were looking at the Bentley SUV when it came out. And he said, man, they got a lot of cars in here. And I was like, yeah. And he said, you know what all these other cars are? And I said, what? And he said, not a Rolls Royce. It's like, it is to me, even though the other cars are great, it is kind of the apex of that world. And so I think if you're associating your brand with the best thing, as opposed to Mercedes, which I think Mercedes has kind of made a mistake in cheapening their brand by coming out with lower end products. And those lower end products aren't that great, in my opinion. They're very plasticky, mass-produced, not the bespoke high-end thing that you want to be. So I think that there is branding that you can't really put a dollar value on, that if we give away a Rolls, we're going to have 4,000 people at the event and participate in the challenge. But if we give away a Bentley or a Mercedes, we're going to have 3,722, because you don't know. But I do think that's an enduring brand that's considered the best of the best of the best. It is aspirational in that a lot of people would aspire to have it, even if they wouldn't want it in their driveway, or they'd be afraid that other people would look at it and say, I don't know. But I like that association. So to me, I thought it was really cool, because you've got the best of the best. That's the best of the best. Put those two together. It's something particularly that your more successful clients are going to be like, they already have Mercedes. That's not a big deal. Like, okay, yeah, I'd love to have one, but do I want another one? I don't know. That's something different. That's upping the game. And if you're the guy that helps them up the game, I think that's a good place to be.
it's interesting because especially in like professional services businesses where there's so much, I guess, competition and saturation, you're kind of in danger of commoditization. The brand becomes very important. So it's less about even the service that you offer. You talk about a law firm or even another type of business. It's not just the providing of the legal services. Then you get into things like the client experience. And then when you start talking about brand, I know sometimes people roll their eyes because they're like, well, how do I measure that? How do I track that? And yet, as time goes on, it seems like the most successful businesses are the ones that have built the strongest brands.
Absolutely. That is absolutely true.
I'm just curious from like a skill set standpoint, because I know that when we were talking about like making deals, obviously negotiation's helpful. I know you're an incredible copywriter. Like what are some of the skills that you think every business leader should have to, I guess, put themselves in the best position?
I mean, the truth is it's empathy and creativity are really some of the most important, because empathy allows you to put yourself in the shoes of your customer, your employee, and creativity allows you to draw on untraditional solutions to the problems that they face. And empathy also helps you understand those problems by putting you in the shoes. And if you've got that, you can pretty much hire everything else, because you can hire great copywriters and you can hire smart financial people and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's really about that and your own desire to do the thing that you're doing. If you're into it, then and you're enjoying it, then that comes through. So beyond those couple of things, the basic skill set of a business person, will you be able to figure out more things if you know finance and accounting? Yeah. Will you, be able to know more things if you can think about the law and how it applies and might impact situations? Yeah. But all those are advisors that are available to you, but you can't really buy empathy, because at the top, when you're the entrepreneur, somebody could tell you something, but if you didn't have empathy, they could tell you, hey, these people are feeling this. And you'd be like, I need to make money. But true empathy would be, well, in this case, I should probably put money second because this is really what they need, but that will ultimately make you more money. So I think those are the critical ones.
What you just mentioned, this is something that's been so fascinating to me, of like what it takes to wrap people's heads around this. So I know you're somebody who just provides value with no expectations. Like you're always asking, like, how can I help you? How can I support you? And for the people who do this, they've been able to see that, oh, this is a really great way to operate by. Like a lot of good can come into your life. But I'm curious, when somebody's, let's say they're starting out and they don't have much money and they're struggling, and you kind of suggest this type of mindset, is it fair to say that some of them could approach it and say, well, that sounds like something rich people would say, right? Like that's something you could say at the end and you can come around and look at. How do you help somebody adopt that mindset earlier on?
Well, the way that I would say that is I'd say the most selfish thing that you can do is to do good for other people, because if you can provide value to other people, then they will go out of their way to provide value back to you, and you'll always be building something even if you don't get an immediate return. But if you come with your hand outstretched saying, what can I take from this relationship? They'll smell it on you, just like they'll smell a desperate salesperson, and they won't want to deal with you. You will emit things that cause them to be repelled by you, and you won't get what you want. So whatever position you're in, no one's ever going to give you more than they're willing to give you at the time. And you might be able to hornswoggle it out of them, or bamboozle them into doing something they don't want to do, force them, but that will cost you dearly very, very quickly, almost immediately, because number one, you've lost them for future business. So when I see salespeople trying sales tactics and we're going to get these people to do this, and this unit is worth this, and I'm like, how many buying units are here? It's like, how many people are there? That's a better way for you to think about it. And we all can do a kindness. Like there's always something that we can do, no matter where we are in life, whatever position we're in. And if you do that, it will come back very, very quickly to help you. So I think that leading with what can I do to help you is fortunately the most right and most selfish thing, most self-interested, I should say, thing that you can do. So to me, that's kind of cool.
And Roland, I'm sure that we're all getting advice. I'm curious, what's been the best advice you've received and the worst advice you've received?
Your collective consciousness comes from so many places that you don't even have an idea, right? That's the best advice that I'm sure that I received. I don't think I probably came up with that myself. I'd like to think I did, but I'm sure there's been a billion people before me that have said the same thing. So that to me would be the best advice I've ever gotten, was whatever caused me to believe that to be the case, and then to try it. I think I have everything that I have, from friends to my relationship with my kids and my wife, to businesses, to money, to experience, because that's advice that I actually follow. So I can't think of any better advice than that.
And what would you say is the worst advice?
I block that stuff out of my head. It's terrible. I probably learn better from it. I think I just try to take the lesson from bad information that I get and go forward. I mean, there's plenty of invest in X, or do this deal, or you should do something with this person, but I it's all gone from my mind because it's just not where I want to live.
And with where you are today, you got amazing family, your wife, like everything that you kind of built up to this point. And yet it seems like you're more engaged than ever. You're involved in many businesses. Like, you're excited, you're energized. What's keeping you going at this point?
I like puzzles and I like the game. So to me, business is all about puzzles. And what's cool about business is it's puzzles that when you solve, you help people and you also make money. And so that's kind of a cool thing. And I've been a puzzle guy since, and riddles, puzzles, complex things. If there's something that's what attracted me to the law, right? Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. Okay, what's the issue? There could be an infinite number of issues here. Can we spot them all? I don't know. Maybe there's issues that nobody's ever seen before. What are the rules? Well, there's a whole bunch of rules that we've got that we can apply to that, but in an infinite combination. And then the analysis, oh my God, how creative can we be in the analysis to pull from stare decisis and case law and things like that to apply into coming up with a conclusion. And the conclusion is completely malleable because we can apply that to anything we want. That's 4 multiples of things in the law that you can take and go create an almost infinite number of potential outcomes. That to me is fascinating. And the opportunity to structure those in a way that leads to the outcome that you desire is a fun challenge. So I would never get tired of that. I would never get tired of SEO, because SEO is ever changing and there's always new wrinkles coming in. So I like those complex situations like that. And I find life to be like that. So I don't see myself ever being disengaged with life, because there are just so many things that are coming. And I'm also assuming that within 5 years from now, everything that's working for me probably isn't going to work anymore. So that keeps me sharp and always thinking about where's the next place to go. But I think it's just, if you're curious, then you'll always be fascinated by business, life, family, everything, because there's never an end to the new things that you can learn and discover and experience.
And Roland, as we come to a close, this being the Game Changing Attorney podcast, what does being a game changer mean to you?
I think it's having an impact that's positive on anyone. I think, I'm not a legacy person. I don't believe that I need to be remembered for thousands or hundreds of years. I believe that whoever's in front of me right now should be impacted positively by me. And I am 100% focused on that person at that moment right then. And I think being a game changer is that you understand that the sum total of your life is the multiple of all of those individual singular moments that you have with other people to make a positive impact, to make a difference. And so that is what really changes the game. It's not the big, grand, momentary gesture. It's how you show up every single day for every year that you are on the planet. And that can change the game. Even for one person for just a little bit of time, that's a win.
I hope you enjoyed revisiting this episode of the Game Changing Attorney podcast with our guest, Roland Frasier, and have gained new insights from our timeless conversation. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at GameChangingAttorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691 and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on our interview with Roland Frasier, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.